We kicked 2023 off with the movies Megan and Scream, which kind of felt like a little bit of a downer compared to what we had gotten the year before. So, myself and Dave Wilkins went and saw Evil Dead Rise. And is this the movie to get us back on track? Join us as we review this movie and see if we are going to have a resurgence in 2023. Welcome into Hometown Ghost Stories horror movie reviews. I am your host, Rob Coakley. And as always, hasn't missed a horror movie review yet. I am joined by Dave Wilkins.
Is it too late? I mean, it's not too late for me to just walk out and miss this one, right? I couldn't do that.
I mean, that's what I wanted to do on a couple of horror movies that I've watched this year. So you might as well go ahead and do it. But no, that was not the case with the movie that myself and you watched today, the day it came out, Evil Dead Rise. And we're going to do this one a little bit different than some of the other ones. We are going to do a spoiler-free review first, give our scores, and then after our scores, for the people that want to hear some spoilers, we will get into a spoiler review. But just because this movie came out literally today, we are dropping this the day that the movie technically came out. We want to do it so that people have the chance to go see it and kind of hear our thoughts without giving away too much. Does that sound good, Dave?
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
All right. Do you have a synopsis for us?
I do. Evil Dead Rise, directed by Lee Cronin. A reunion between two estranged sisters gets cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons, thrusting them into a primal battle for survival as they face the most nightmarish version of family imaginable. So it's been, 5, 6 hours since we saw this, and I've had some time to think about it,
Mhm.
and I've thought about it, and I'm fully ready to say that this is the best horror movie I've ever seen.
Which is a very bold statement to make. So, without getting into spoilers, can you give some context behind that?
Yeah, so it's one of my favorite movies of all time is The Conjuring, and that this movie made that movie look like Harry Potter. This movie was terrifying. If I wasn't completely just what's the word I'm looking for?
Desensitized?
Desensitized
Yeah.
to horror movies altogether, I would be shook. I wouldn't be able to sleep for weeks. This movie was terrifying. Some of the visuals was harrowing. They were just harrowing. What's her name? I'm drawing blanks now because I'm so excited about this. I can't wait to go see this movie again. It was so fucking good. So good. I don't have any negatives about it. The cinematography was amazing. The sound effects were perfect. The music was great. Everything about this movie was terrifying. There were a couple of jump scares that were really, really good. They didn't overuse them. They worked them in there perfectly. And I'm a sucker for a really good jump scare, really well set up. And this movie just hit everything. The acting was phenomenal. This movie could have been make or break it with the acting if it could have gone the other way. But I feel like Alyssa Sutherland did such a good job with this. She could have carried this movie on her back, but didn't need to because she was surrounded by such a strong cast and they all did such a good job. And the director did an amazing job. This was an amazing movie.
Yeah, I think this was also an amazing movie. And the one thing I'll say about the Evil Dead franchise as a whole, when the original remake or, reboot or whatever you want to call it that came out in 2013, a lot of people, including myself, were concerned because Sam Raimi wasn't directing that movie. And I thought that was a phenomenal entry in the franchise with a new director. And here we get another new director, and it's like, well, what are we going to get? And I had some reservations going into this movie just based off of some of the plot points. Uh, in general, just it being with a bunch of kids in it and stuff. So like I was like, are they gonna water this movie down? And they do not water this movie down. This is an
No.
Evil Dead movie. Like you said, the visuals, and we talk about how like there is subgenres within horror, some that just do jump scares, some that are suspenseful or everything. This movie kind of does everything, and it also does everything great. The tension in this movie is phenomenal. Like you said, the cinematography, and that's one thing you get from like every Evil Dead movie, right? Is they've invented camera shots from
Yeah.
the first movie on. And there was a particular scene, and I'll get into it, but it was when they're just standing in the kitchen, it's just framed a certain way, and it just looked visually like, wow, that's I don't know why that shot looks so unique, but it does, and it's so effective. So there's stuff like that going on in this movie. Sound quality, like the sound design, everything. Like we've talked about movies that are trying to rely more on sound lately to be terrifying. And this movie did it without almost I know they tried to do it, but it just felt like they didn't even try to do it and they nailed it.
Yeah.
Right? So everything that they do along with it, it's different, but you still know it's an Evil Dead movie. Like it's just so well done. So I am ecstatic that we went and saw this the day that the movie came out. I'm going to give this a high score, obviously. I'm still trying to balance where I would put it as a horror, like one of my favorite horror movies. I'm probably not quite willing to go that it's my favorite of all time yet because it's just so fresh. But I have no problem with you saying that because it is a movie, and this is what I base these movies off of sometimes is I go back to think about like because I was a psycho as a kid and I watched, horror movies at 7, 8 years old, even younger. And I remember the types of movies that would scare me to death as a child. And I don't think there's a lot of movies that have come out recently. The Conjuring is a good one. I still would have been scared of that movie as a kid. And there's a couple others like Sinister that would do a great job as a child. But movies that come out now feel like they don't have the atmosphere, the tension, and just the scary visuals that if you put a 9, and I'm not telling you to do this, but I'm just saying, like, as a 9 or 10-year-old, if you were watching this movie, you would be horrified for probably ever. I think and I say this because it's one of those movies that would probably stay with you for the rest of your life if you watched it at a really young age. Like,
Mm.
there are certain movies that have stayed with me from childhood that I think about when I think of horror movies because I remember that feeling as a child watching this movie. And if you put this movie in front of a child, I guarantee you they will not forget it for the rest of their life.
Well, part of that is because of the way this movie was written and the characters that they haven't had incorporated in it. And this is what sets it apart from other Evil Dead movies a little bit. All the other Evil Deads, and we're not really talking about three because three is like
Yeah.
a whole different, dragon. But I think I just made that term up too. It's a whole other dragon,
It's all another dragon.
you know. But this one, so with your typical Evil Dead movie, you have a group of friends that go to a cabin and then they all kill each other, whatever.
Mhm.
And this one is family. These are her children, their mother, aunt, they're all related. So
Yep.
it adds a whole different element of loss and sorrow and fear that the other ones just didn't have. I think
Mm.
2013 might have been a little bit gorier of a movie, but not by much because this movie was an absolute bloodbath.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but this one had a different element of fear and terror just because of that one aspect. And I think
Yeah.
that's what kind of sets it apart from the other ones.
I think that's a great point. That was one of the things that I wanted to bring up. You have a sense of caring about the characters more in this movie than any of the other Evil Deads. As much as I like Ash, and trust me, every time an Evil Dead movie comes out, there's a part of me that always wants Ash Williams to come back into it because I love that character. But it's also weirdly a franchise that I didn't need him in the two movies he was
Yeah,
in. I know he's technically at the end stinger of the last one, but he's not needed. The other thing I think this movie does great is to go to your point about it being a cabin in the woods. The whole fear of that was being isolated and unable to get out of this space. So we go to a apartment building for this one. This is not a spoiler. This is what the movie's about. But they still find a way to make you feel isolated and alone in the middle of Los Angeles.
yeah,
So kudos to them for that because I wasn't sure with the setting how that was going to work out for this particular movie. But the way that you still have that sense of isolation and dread and how are you going to get out of this within this movie. So that's another thing that I thought was really well done with it.
I agree. And you said, mentioned there's no Ash. Lily Sullivan, the protagonist, is your Ash in this movie, and she did
Yes.
a phenomenal job playing Ash. Her character wasn't Ash; the character's name was Beth, but she was essentially your Ash,
Yeah.
and she did a phenomenal job. Like I said earlier, all the acting in this was really good. I don't have any qualms about the acting; it was all phenomenal. And you had a bunch of kid actors. And we always talk about how kid actors can either be hit or miss, or make or break a movie. The kid actors were great, and I think one of them, this was her film debut,
Yeah.
the little girl.
Yeah.
So
And she was
that's
great. I
she
thought she
was
was great.
amazing. Yeah, they were all really good.
The other thing that I'll say for this franchise is even with Ash being like such a strong protagonist, every iteration of a protagonist in this franchise has been strong. The Evil Dead reboot had a strong protagonist. The Evil Dead Rise movie has a strong protagonist. Like you really root and care about these characters. And what I specifically liked about this movie is it was still as terrifying as it is, as scary, as suspenseful, as much dread as you get in it. It doesn't fully lose the humor of the franchise either. There is still some funny moments within this movie that work, and they don't feel shoehorned or anything. It just works within this movie, and I'm very glad to see that because I don't remember that being the case in the reboot as much as that was a really good movie. That felt really like just pure, like you said, buckets of gore, horror, scary. This movie I thought still had a lot of the I guess like the soul of the franchise where you want some moments that are rather funny. I know other movies, some people might not like some of the franchise because of how over the top funny it went, but being able to keep some humor in it, I thought really worked in this movie.
There wasn't much humor. There was a little bit.
No, a
There were a
little bit.
couple of there were a couple of throwbacks too to the original movies, which I thought was good. But for the most part, this was probably the least funny of all of them. Had the least amount of humor, but there was still a little bit. Like a couple of scenes made me chuckle a little bit here and there. I don't even know if they were supposed to be funny. We can get into some of those after we give our scores and get
Yeah.
into the spoilers. But this
But
was
it's
really
there is the point. Like it is there.
it is there. It felt like an Evil Dead movie, which it
Right.
could have gone. It would have been. It still would have been a good movie if they didn't really nail the Evil Dead vibe. I
Mhm.
think it still would have been really strong, but they absolutely nailed the Evil Dead vibe, which is important. But take it or leave it. It would have been good either way. This had it, and it was phenomenal.
Mhm.
And I just want to go back to talking about Alyssa Sutherland's performance. Probably the uh, demonically best demonic possession performance I think I've seen, right up there with Linda Blair in The Exorcist and Jennifer Carpenter from Emily Rose. Those are like the two that I always thought did the best with that. And
Mhm.
this is right up there with them. You could make the argument that I think easily that this is one of the top three performances for that genre.
So good. So believable. Just everything about her in this movie was just really well done. The dynamic of the family was really well done too. It felt like a real family,
Mm,
and not just because like it's, a single mom with 3 kids or anything like that, which is the case, but just like the sister dynamic felt real. It didn't feel nothing felt perfect. It felt like a real family is what I would say, like with
yeah,
real issues between each other. Every kid had their own personality. They were able to showcase that without beating you over the head with any of it. Just like visually within 30 seconds, you kind of get the scope of what each character was and what their personality was. They did a really good job with character development without spending too much time on it, is what I would say.
yeah, I agree with that. Should
So,
we?
do you should give some scores?
I think we should.
I wonder if you're going to give it a 5, Dave.
I'm not. I'm going to give it a 5.1
Oh,
because I'm
wow.
inventing a score for this one because it really does sit above all the other fives that I've given. This is my favorite horror movie that I've ever seen. My all-time favorite was The Thing, always was. This I think is I just this was such a good horror movie. So scary, so well done. Just goosebumps thinking about it. That
Mm,
title sequence was just
yeah,
goosebumps. I was
yeah,
just turned into one big goosebump. It was
yeah. It
so good. I
starts
love
off
this movie.
strong.
This is I think is the best. You can make the argument this was probably the best horror movie, at least that I've ever seen.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna give it a 5 because I loved it from start to beginning. From start to beginning.
Start to
From
beginning.
I loved all of the beginning. I also love the middle and the end of this movie, though. It is a really well done movie. So I am gonna give it a 5 stars as well. It might be my favorite horror movie. I think I'd like to watch it again, and I think I'd like to separate from it for a little bit more.
Mm,
That's kind of my process with movies. I need some time occasionally, and everybody's process for this stuff is different, but there is a chance. It's up there is what I'll say. Like it is a movie that I will probably recommend for the rest of my life.
absolutely.
Like if you want a scary movie. And the other thing I want to bring up before we start getting into some spoilers is we were talking about this with Scream 6 a couple weeks ago. We were talking about we kind of ran down what the best horror franchises were of all time. And I said Scream's probably got the number one spot just because even when there is a bad movie in the Scream franchise, it's still watchable. And after this movie coming out, I think there's enough movies in the franchise now and this TV show, but you don't even have to count that if you don't want to. There's nothing The Evil Dead has never put out anything bad, in my opinion. Everything Evil Dead is amazing. It's 4.5 to 5 stars for everything. Like I
Hmm.
love everything Evil Dead. I love the remakes, the reboots. I love the originals. I love the TV shows. I just think after this movie and it giving it a big enough portfolio of 5 movies and, a 3-season TV show, to me, and I understand not everyone's going to agree with this, The Evil Dead is probably the greatest horror franchise there is, and we should probably do a bracket or something,
That'd be
maybe
fun.
as for one day for um to kind of do like almost a March Madness type deal.
That's a good idea. We should absolutely do that.
So maybe we'll do something like that. But I think The Evil Dead would have to draw a 1 seed because it is just such a good movie.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So we've done our spoiler free review. We haven't given anything away from the movie. You got our scores. I think it's time to get into some spoilers. So if you want to go see this movie, which I highly recommend you should see
In
before we
theaters.
spoil it, and you should see it in theaters. If you're going to go see one horror movie this year, I am confident in saying this is the one you should go see already. I know it's only April, but I can say confidently that this is probably going to be the best horror movie that comes out this year. It's going to be hard to top this. So go see that. And let's get into some spoilers and let's just start right at the beginning. That opening sequence, I think, has the scariest part in the entire movie.
It was so good.
It was so good. There's the part where she's in the room, her cousin is kind of sick. She starts reading Wuthering Heights
Before that,
before
before
that.
that, the very opening of this movie where you get the demon,
Oh,
where
yes,
you
yes.
think you get the demon POV, like the classic Evil Dead demon POV, where you're going
Yep.
through the woods, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, I bet they used a drone to film this because I remember talking about when they filmed Evil Dead One, how it
Mhm.
was literally just them with a camera on a stick or whatever it was that they used. I'm like, they must
Yep.
have upgraded and used a drone to film this because it's really, really well done. And then it turns out it was a drone, and it was, you know, that's the way that they incorporated that. And then he says, she's like, "Oh, you could have cut my head off." He's like, "Oh, it actually would have just mangled your face,"
Yeah.
and that comes right back.
Yeah. It was a great setup for that. But then afterwards they go into the female cousin goes into her cousin's room to read while she's sick. I can't remember the character's name, but she's reading Wuthering Heights,
Jessica, I
a-
think.
and the sick cousin is on the bed and she just starts reciting the page that she's on in this creepy voice. And it's very, very unsettling, especially the passage that was being read
Hmm.
was I've never read Wuthering Heights. I
Me
had no
neither.
idea what that was about. Not
Might
that material.
might go read
So
it.
yeah, it made me want to read that book. I'll say that because it was terrifying. So I think it's just the kickstart with that, and then it goes right into a scalping, which it was
Yeah.
also creepy well done. And like you said, we get into that drone where it just mangles somebody's face. And the other thing I think this movie did really well is some of that uh, stuff that I usually just pick right up on, like the oh my god, what is the word I'm looking for? Where they set something up and it comes back later in the movie. So
Callback.
generally, yeah, callback, um, whatever you want to call it. They set so many things up that came back and paid off in this movie that usually I'm like, oh, that's gonna come back. We're gonna know about that. That's leading, that's foreshadowing for something else here, right? And there were so many little ones in this that I just didn't pick up on. The daughter hiding the scissors under the couch, for
Mm,
one thing, later in the movie, where she hides them so her mom doesn't know she has them. I just didn't even put it together that and I should have known, but it was just so like subtle in a way that you're just like, oh, she's just hiding it from her mom. It doesn't mean anything. She's just because they're portraying her to almost be like psychotic because she's cutting dolls' heads off and
yeah, which was
making
one of the funny.
Stephanie,
Stephanie. Yeah.
which was
Wait, so real quick, because I want
mhm,
to go back and watch this movie again because number one, I loved it, but number two,
y-
there I know I'm going to pick up on so many things the second time through.
yeah.
When she was making Stephanie, was she explaining it to the brother or the sister?
She was explaining it to the brother, I
Okay,
believe.
okay, all right. Because I was going to say it would be very ironic and would have been a good callback if she happened to be explaining it to the sister, who she ended up impaling with
While the
with Beth.
sister was the one who broke it.
Oh,
So
right.
so it is kind of a callback to that she ended up stabbing her sister with it after her sister broke it.
Mm.
So they do they do a callback there. Um, but yeah, they set so many up that just pay off so well and they're so small. But I kind of want to get into some of the brutality of this movie because holy shit, they did some stuff that I did not expect in this movie.
They
I
did, and it hit really hard, the scenes that were very brutal. I do think 2013 had more brutal kills, which is fine one way or the other. It doesn't really take anything away from either, but 2013 had some very, very brutal
I
brutal
think
kills.
2013 had more brutal kills and like application of the kills. I think some thought provoking brutality is a concept I'll come up with right now, where I thought the scene where the protagonist is looking out the eye hole of the apartment and there's the two brothers that are kids
Mhm.
in the hallway and they're running from, you know, one of the deadites. And instead of trying to open the door to help them because she wouldn't be able to, let's
No.
be real, and her having to watch those two kids die might be more brutal in the sense that like it was unexpected and sort of traumatizing, especially the younger kid when he
Yeah,
gets, blasted across the
dismembered.
hall and
Yeah.
dismembered. It was really brutal and they did not hold back. They did not hold back based on your age in this movie. Which
They fucked some kids up.
they fuck some kids up. Which is like it's hard to watch, but if this were to happen, a demon's not going to be like, or a deadite's not going to be like, under 18 can't kill them, right?
Yeah.
They are going to cause as much havoc and murder and dismay as they can. And they'd probably start with the kids to make things even worse for the people that are still alive. So,
Yeah. This movie did a good job with the shotgun. So one of
yep.
the things that always come back to with the Evil Dead movies with this franchise is the shotgun and the chainsaw. And shotguns are a very loud gun. If you've never heard one go off in person, it is something that you never forget. Like the
Yep.
first time I think I heard a shotgun shot in real life, I thought it was dynamite. It's just a very loud bang. And that's something
Mhm.
that a lot of movies don't always get. You get like a boom, and like a crashing boom sound. This movie nailed the shotgun sound. Maybe just because I saw it in the theater and you get that big theater surround sound, but this is one of the movies that absolutely nailed the sound and the feel of the shotgun.
Yeah.
Not the feel of the shotgun. I don't know what it feels like to be shot by a shotgun. But
We
but
can test it
absolutely
out if you like.
when that bang goes off in this movie, I was like, "Oh, that sounded like an actual shotgun going off," which is loud. And yeah.
Another thing I thought they did well with the shotgun is, again, you brought it up. Shotguns are a staple in the Evil Dead franchise. Shotguns and chainsaws, right? That is what the Evil Dead franchise is. That is how you generally combat the Deadites. I didn't even think about that until the ending with
Same.
the shotgun in it, and as soon as, like, the chainsaw appeared, I'm like, "Oh my god, she has a shotgun and chainsaw," but she had a shotgun for so long before I even put that together. I was like, "Wow," I was so invested in the movie, right? I wasn't sitting there trying to be like, "Oh, well, this is Evil Dead, this is Evil Dead, this is Evil Dead." I was just so invested in the movie and the characters and the story that I didn't even put it together till the 2 items were basically together.
Yeah, same. I didn't either, but there they were. This was uh, one thing I want to talk about was the jump scares because I alluded to it in the beginning part before the spoilers. But there were some good jump scares. There weren't many. There were only like 2 or 3, but they all got me. Like they did
Yeah.
their job. And my favorite one was when right after the earthquake and Daniel, the son, goes down into that hole into the bank vault and he's
Mhm.
looking around, which is where they found the Necronomicon book was in this bank vault that opened up because of an earthquake. So he's down there and he's snooping around, and all of a sudden, this big crucifix of Jesus Christ just comes smashing down with like a scary wooden face.
Mhm.
Completely jumped out of my skin. It was such a good jump scare. There weren't a lot. There were only that one and maybe 1 or 2 others, but they were so well done that they were
Yeah.
just like nothing better than a good, authentic jump scare.
Yeah, they relied a lot on, like, that feeling of dread, and we talked about some of the camera shots and stuff. So there's that kitchen shot where it's a close up of the mother who has already turned, and the family is in the background, and it almost looks like the mother is, like, superimposed versus the background of the family,
Hmm.
but it was, like, such a jarring shot. I was like, "I don't know if I've ever seen a shot that looked quite like this before," and it really, like, just caught my attention because it made me feel more dread for the family for some reason. So it was just such a great shot. And the other thing I think this movie did really well done, they didn't invent this. Other movies have done it in the past, but I think this movie probably did it better than any others, is the peephole shots. The way you're seeing through the peephole what's going on in the hallway from the apartment that the family's in as they've blocked out the Deadites was visually jarring. Like,
Yes,
it looked really it just you felt it is the best way I can say it.
it
It
was
almost
so
felt like you
creepy.
were really looking through the peephole.
It was so
Um,
creepy.
it
The
was so
visuals in this
creepy.
movie alone were so creepy, and that was one of the ones that when I was watching it through that peephole, I was one thinking like, how did they shoot that? Probably with just a fisheye lens or whatever. But it was so good because Alyssa Sutherland, who did a really good job, and props to the makeup team also because they made
Yeah.
her look terrifying. Was
Mhm.
even more terrifying through that fisheye lens of that peephole. Was just so unsettling.
Very, very unsettling. So just camera work. Kudos to the entire production staff of this movie, from the actors to the director to anyone that worked on anything. Everything seemed to just it's a movie where everyone worked together perfectly from what got put on screen is what
Yes,
I'll say.
the
It's so good.
Yeah, the practical effects were phenomenal, and there was some CGI towards the end, which I think if we got too much of it, it would have been a negative. But I
Yeah.
could kind of tell that they were cutting it so we didn't get too much monster towards the
Yeah.
end. Because, spoiler alert, there's a very scary monster at the end of this,
Yeah.
and it's very different from anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But it was so good. You could tell there was some CGI in there, but they cut it masterfully so that it didn't look bad. It didn't look like bad CGI. So it was really, really, really well done from
Yeah. I
beginning to end.
again, we gave this movie, I mean, Dave gave it a 5.1, which might never happen again on this show. But I have no qualms with anything in this movie. Everything runtime felt good. It didn't feel like you were sitting there for too long. Everything felt great about this movie from beginning to end.
Yeah, the runtime was, I think, about 140 minutes, and I could have watched 3 hours of this. I could have kept going. But I do think the runtime was perfect because I think that's how you know it's perfect. When the movie ends and you're like, "Oh, no, it's over." I think that's how you know that the runtime was absolutely perfect, which I think this was, because it could have been, maybe if it did drag on too long, we would have noticed that, and then we would have said this was too long. But I think the fact that it left me wanting more was indicative of the fact that it was a perfect amount of time.
Yeah, I have nothing negative to say in terms of that at all. It's got a great score on Rotten Tomatoes. There were some stuff that I was worried about. Again, the kids being in it. I thought this was gonna. I thought all the kids would live. That did not happen by a long
Spoiler,
shot.
they did not. They did
Yeah,
not.
we are in the spoiler section. Uh, just really, really well done. I don't know if there's much more to say in the spoiler part. Is there any closing thoughts you have?
Just go see this movie, and I think you should absolutely see it in theaters. Or if you're not going to see it in theaters, you're going to wait for it to come out, turn the volume way up. And this movie is so scary, and the sound is such a big part of it. It's just such a good movie. I can't wait to go see it again. I might try and talk my wife into going to see it with me tonight so I can watch it again because it was that good. This is one that I'll definitely see in the theaters again, and I'll probably buy it when it comes out.
Yeah, I own very few movies. Like Trick or Treat's one of the ones that I own. I would have no problem owning this movie on some sort of Blu-ray or something, just because it's just so good. It's just
Mhm.
such a good movie. If you can't get to the theater, I understand, but if you can, you should go see this movie. I hope you saw it before you listened to the spoiler part. But if you
Yes.
didn't, but if
Yes.
you didn't, once again, just go see this movie. So I think that's gonna do it for us here at Hometown Ghost Stories, an Evil Dead Rise horror movie review. And just as pointed out, they set up for a sequel. They set it
Thank
up
God.
with there being
I can't
another
wait.
book. There's a third book out there, so I do like the way they did that. So if there's going to be the same cast and crew, and well, if it's just at least the same crew, I'll be happy.
Before we get too far away from it, before we
Hmm.
end, which would
Hmm.
be as far away from it as you can get, the way they incorporated the Necronomicon book in this was really good, and it was different from other movies also. It was
Yeah,
so terrifying. The book was so scary in this, and you don't really get to, in the other movies, you don't really get to see inside the book all that much, but this movie really focused on that, and they did an excellent job with it, and it's terrifying.
yeah, it
Terrifying movie.
was great. So collector's items I might want in the future is, since there is going to be a third book version, all three versions of the Necronomicon to display maybe at some point in my life
Right?
will be something.
Hopefully they're more affordable than the Babadook pop-up book.
Well, let's hope so. Well, for myself and for Dave Wilkins, that is going to do it for this review of Evil Dead Rise. Go see it, and in the comments in the Discord, tell us what you think. Until next time, we will catch you later. Peace. Hey everybody, Rob from Hometown Ghost Stories here. Wanted to thank you for checking out this piece of side content. If you really liked it, you can head over to Patreon, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to these a little bit early. Also, we are doing member-only stuff on Patreon, such as our History of Ghost series, where we talk about like Andrios, Banshees. We let you know where they came from, their origin, some stories associated with them. It's a lot of fun. Until then, if you look over this shoulder here, you can find one of our earlier episodes. And if you look down here, we got another side content episode. Until next time, from Jesse, myself, and I guess even Dave, thanks for watching Hometown Ghost Stories.